So as I sit down to record this, the date today is August the 9th, 2022, and today just happens to be day one of take two of the 2022 World Junior Championships. Canada is not playing today. They will kick off the tournament tomorrow against Latvia. And I wish I could say that all of the focus is on the team that's going to be on the ice this year, but unfortunately with some recent news, that's just not going to be the case. A lot of the attention is going to be focused firmly on, in fact, several teams of several years past, because it seems that Hockey Canada has had a little bit of a problem with sexual misconduct, and it seems like it's had it for quite a long time. So just to give you a sense of where the trouble started more recently, it kind of goes back to a complaint that was made regarding the 2016 Team Canada from the World Junior Championships, and a reception that they had in London, Ontario, where apparently a woman was sexually assaulted by several players on that team, and apparently several players who were not on that team. Most of them hockey players, some of them not hockey players. It sounds like as many as 14 people in total, may have been as many as 8 of the players from that team, none of whom have been named publicly. We don't really know who any of them are. And it doesn't really look like at any point that Hockey Canada brass have been really forthcoming about exactly what it was that took place, and even about the fact that there was a complaint. This story was a surprise to a lot of people out there, including myself. I honestly thought that Hockey Canada was a better organization than this, and it was really disappointing to find out that that's not the case. And apparently it has not been that way. Apparently it's been that way, that they're not a better organization than this. It's been this way for a very long time, because as time has worn out, we have heard about more and more complaints from more and more years. And as a matter of fact, it seems like Hockey Canada had some sort of a slush fund, maybe even multiple slush funds, in which they paid out what turned out to be, more than $1 million, basically in hush money to these to women who had come out and made these complaints. It's an absolutely horrifying story. It's absolutely horrifying in its own right. But unfortunately, as it just so happens in Canada, there are some people out there who can't, they're just not content to let this story be about whatever actually happened. They're not content to actually let this story be about the fact that there are women out there who are victims of sexual assault. No, there are a few people out there that really needed to go out and find themselves a way to try to make this story all about them. And so with that in mind, it seems like the person in the Canadian media sphere, if you can even say that she's a part of it anymore, because as a result of part of the story that I'm about to talk about, she actually managed to burn her career pretty much to the ground several years ago. And who I'm talking about is a person by the name of Nora Laredo. I wouldn't say that Nora Laredo is at this time a household name in Canada, but a few years ago, right around the time of the Humboldt Broncos bus crash, she managed to become so, and she managed to become not only a household name, but a very nearly universally reviled household name, based on some of the comments that she came out and she made about not so much about the bus crash, but really about the victims and about the public response to the bus crash. More specifically yet, what Nora Laredo chose to focus in on was really not even so much just the public outpouring of grief surrounding the bus crash that killed 16 players and injured 13 more people. I should say 16 people. Not all of them were players. There were coaches and trainers that were amongst those that died, including the bus driver. But 16 people killed and 13 people injured. People that certainly didn't deserve for that to happen to them, people who weren't doing anything wrong, just people that were in one form or another just trying to live out their hockey dreams. And so they get hit by their bus gets hit by a semi-truck. 16 of them die, 13 of them are injured. And what Nora Laredo chose to focus in on is the amount of money that is raised to assist the victims of it. The injured survivors, and the families of those who lost their lives. including if you're an Edmonton Oilers fan, Jackson Joseph, the son of defenseman Chris Joseph. He was one of those that perished that day. I've seen Mr. Joseph on a couple of occasions since then, and I've just never actually thought of I've never thought of the right words to say to him about it. So our conversations have unfortunately been pretty brief. But really, what that just goes to show you is the emotional weight of what took place. And if you're going to, if a person really needs to comment on the amount of money that's raised to assist the survivors and the families of the victims, maybe the thing that didn't really need to be focused in on, was the race of the people that were in that crash, the people that got hurt and the people that died. Maybe of all the things that we needed to talk about was not the race of those people. But that's exactly what Nora Laredo chose to talk about. In a series of tweets on her Twitter account, basically came out and said that, the amount of money that was raised had a lot to do with their race and their youth and the fact that they were hockey players and their gender. And if it was, say, a busload of Aboriginals that had died, of Indigenous hockey players that had died, that there wouldn't have been the same outcry, the same outcry of support and of public grief, which, quite frankly, really is just, that's not anything that you can actually verify, because we have had a couple of incidents like that in Canada, bus crashes where hockey players have died, never quite this many. This is kind of a unique event in Canadian history in that, but we haven't seen this with a busload of Indigenous hockey players. And if you so lack faith in the Canadian people that you think that the Canadian people are so racist that they wouldn't care if a busload full of Indigenous hockey players died, that is not anything that you can say with any amount of certainty. And within days of this bus crash, before the victims had even been laid to rest, to be coming out and saying that was a terribly, extremely insensitive and callous, and by point of fact, antagonistic thing to say. And so I don't think that, if Nora Laredo had two brain cells to rub together, I don't think that she should have at all been shocked when the public response to her comments was one of pretty much universal disgust. And so for quite a while thereafter, Nora Laredo's Twitter account got absolutely lit up with people that were criticizing her over her comments. It went on for quite a while, and I actually paid quite close attention to it, and I loved every second of it. And as a matter of fact, I still do. But now you may recall that I said that if Nora Laredo had two brain cells to rub together, that she probably would have been the first person to look at what she had said and say, like maybe this was a mistake. She probably would have thought twice in advance, but really didn't, because she was counting on the wave of public support to come behind her. And instead, the opposite thing happened. And Nora Laredo's media career, as it just so happened, completely melted down. I believe she had a regular writing gig at Maclean's. That went up in smoke. I believe that she had been periodically writing for the Globe and Mail. They were no longer interested in carrying her work, and rightfully so. I think that it is not unreasonable, for media outlets with that kind of reach and that kind of influence to expect their writers to have, quite a bit better judgment than something like that. To come out and antagonize people and try to race bait, the entire country at a time when the entire country was in mourning. And at a time when the families of these bus crash victims were all struggling and they were all in mourning. Yeah, probably not the kind of person that you want in the pages of your magazine or the pages of your newspaper. But of course, because Nora Laredo doesn't have the aforementioned two brain cells to rub together, there is one thing that you can count on, and that is that Nora Laredo never really felt like she was responsible for the things that she said. You know, for the feelings that she stirred up, and for the way that she had basically come after a country of 30 million people that were mourning, you know, the lives of 29 people. You know, she actually came out and said that, you know, all the public backlash against her was not legitimate, and it was all some kind of conspiracy, and that there were people that were organizing all of this, and it was all just everybody was out to get her. And that was where this entire thing took the most perverse turn of all. It's because even with 16 people dead, 13 people injured, and the families of all of those people, you know, all struggling and all mourning and struggling to cope with it, somehow, in the mind of Nora Laredo, the bus crash victims were no longer the victims. Now Nora Laredo was the real victim, and she was expecting everybody to know it. But really the most striking thing at that point was really just so obvious it was that Nora Laredo was basically projecting onto the rest of the country and to all of her critics. You know, she insisted that, you know, this was all organized by powerful people, and that, you know, nobody could possibly take issue with the thing that she said, even though there was every indication that it was entirely, that it was an entirely organic response, an entirely natural response to her extremely callous comments. And suddenly people that were linked to various labor unions came out, and, you know, they were publicly supporting Nora Laredo, who, by the way, at that time just happened to be an executive in one of the media unions in Canada. And it was really interesting to see the way that they played their hand, because there was at least one individual, I will never remember, I can't remember his name offhand, but I will never forget the tweet that he put on Twitter talking about this, where he basically said, it's like, you know, all these people thinking that they can tear down Nora Laredo, they don't understand how powerful she is. And this guy was basically telling all the people that were disgusted and rightly offended by Nora Laredo's comments that it didn't really matter what they thought or what they felt about what she had said, because she was powerful and they weren't. And this kind of snowballed from there. There was even a very bizarre, there was this very bizarre segment on the CBC about it, wherein they brought in some individual, and I really wish I had gone and looked this up so I could remember this guy's name, but I will never forget his vocation. They brought him online, they brought him onto TV, and they told everybody that he was a futurist. He was a futurist. And he could demonstrate that you know, none of the outcry was, none of the backlash was legitimate, and it was all organized by the right wing, and, you know, powerful conservatives were trying to bring down Nora Laredo, and everybody was out to get her. Her exact narrative somehow managed to get itself onto the CBC without any kind of response from the people that were criticizing her. And so then that narrative began to reappear in various other news outlets, which is something that you can do if you are, say, you know, a executive in a media union, and you have, you know, very, very influential people in your Rolodex that you can call up and get working with you on this story. So this thing that they had said about these people that were criticizing her, which was not true, it turns out that that exact thing was actually true about her and about them, which really tells you everything that you need to know about at least a certain segment of the Canadian news media and the way that they actually work. But as it pertained to Nora Laredo, they had a little problem on their hands, and that is that the more they tried to sell that to the public, the fewer buyers they found that they had. You know, the public disgust to Nora Laredo's comments was too organic. It was too genuine, and it was too natural. No matter where they put this, they couldn't seem to get anybody to really agree with it, to really believe in it. And to this day, it seems that almost nobody believes in it, with the exception of you know, a very, very small number of sycophantic people that kind of congregate around her Twitter profile. And as it pertains to her career, even in all these years since then, you know, she's never really gotten it back. I mean, she has managed to have a few pieces published in the Washington Post, you know, the same newspaper that employs Taylor Lorenz, which really tells you everything that you need to know about the Washington Post, you know, and their standards. No, but Maclean's, they haven't really had her back. The Globe and Mail, they haven't really had her back. Hasn't really popped up anywhere outside of these tiny little union-funded internet publications. You know, all this time later, Nora Laredo's career is still pretty much dead in the water. And whether she likes to admit it or not, she did it to herself. And so then all of these years, this story comes out of Hockey Canada, and it's rightfully horrifying. And it seems like there could be quite a few women out there walking around out there who are victims, you know, of some predation, you know, linked to this organization by people, you know, by players that were, you know, directly associated with this organization. But somehow that's just not enough for Nora Laredo. Somehow all this time later, it had to be about her, because suddenly she pops up on her Twitter account saying that everybody owes her an apology for the way that she was treated after the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. And I got to tell you, that is flat out never going to happen. You know, speaking as somebody who was a prolific critic of Nora Laredo at that time, haven't really thought about her very much until, you know, this recent event when this whole thing came to light. I am not really of a mind to apologize to somebody who was actually in the wrong. Like, if I'm right, I'm not of the mind to apologize to the person who was wrong. Never been of that kind of mind. Never going to be of that kind of mind. It's never going to happen. But the simple fact of the matter is that the Humboldt Broncos bus crash, in one way or another, it couldn't be about those players and about those people that lost their lives. You know, it had to be about Nora Laredo. You know, all this time later, all these women who have been abused by players directly linked to Hockey Canada, suddenly their victimhood can't just be about them and the experience that they had. Somehow that also has to be about Nora Laredo? No. Sorry, you're not going to find very many buyers for that one either. But in hindsight, I think it's a lot like what But in hindsight, I think it's all quite a bit like what Joaquin Phoenix said in the Joker. You know, sometimes you just get what you fucking deserve.